Hi, we are Paul and Kimberlee, and this is Riffs and Rants. Today we are going to be talking and riffing about this book, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This is a book about rediscovering or discovering your inner creativity.
Right. Yeah, I think rediscovering is probably the best way to talk about it. One of the basic premises that Ms. Cameron puts forth in the book is that we all have an inner artist, and that it's just through basically negative experiences in life that inner creativity kind of gets beaten out of us. And I think everybody
Everyone can relate to that.
On some level. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
I
think just to expand upon that, one of the things she really talks about is when we're young, when we're children, we have all these dreams and aspirations. And then a lot of times it's usually people who are influential in our lives, our role models, the people we look up to, start pointing us towards more quote unquote realistic goals and things to shoot for.
Right.
And
it's well-meaning.
Right, obviously. Right. Because they care about us, and not every child can be an astronaut or, be a successful artist or actor or actress or singer or whatever it is that we thought we wanted to do when we were little. Swim with dolphins. And so, they...
Is that like a personal thing? Swim with dolphins?
No, it just came to me.
Okay.
So, so things like that are things that maybe we dreamed about doing as kids, and then somebody, our parents or a teacher or someone that we looked up to, a sibling even, aunt or uncle, it could be anybody.
Right.
They would hear us talking about this seriously and they'd say, that's a great, what a great dream. But, maybe you should consider being a business person because that's going to provide for you better in life.
Right. Be a lawyer, be a doctor,
be a teacher. And those are wonderful professions that, I aspired to be a doctor when I was a kid. So there's nothing wrong with that. Just if it's replacing your dreams, a lot of us have things that we wanted to do that we don't do.
Right.
Because we tell ourselves it's not realistic. It's not a good use of our time.
Right.
And so what this book is talking about is rediscovering those loves that we had as children and finding time, making time for them in our lives now. So not necessarily stop being a doctor and go be a guitar player because that's what you wanted to be. But if guitar is something you love, make time for it as more than just a hobby or a frivolous thing, but a real activity in your life. Integrate it into your life.
Right. So I think, she does talk about how, even if you're not doing something that's traditionally in the arts, right? So, not just be a guitar player or a painter, but if you're going to be a bus driver or a stay-at-home mom, all things, like one of the first things that she states in the book is that everyone, the very act of living is creativity, right? That we are creative beings from our core, right? That's all we are, is creativity. We were created through creativity, and we continue to remake the world through creativity.
Right.
So all of us are creative. And she kind of ascribes the label of artist with that. Now, obviously, the book is, maybe not obviously, but the book is very much geared towards tried and true artists, right? Go join an artist commune or something like that. But all of the activities in the book can be applied to anybody who's trying to bring more creativity to their life.
Yes.
And we've talked about this before when we were talking about managing oneself, right? That you have to know yourself, you have to manage yourself, and you really have to guide your own career path, right? You can't have someone else. You're not going to have a very successful life if you're constantly being told what to do.
Right.
And one of the things, and this is one of the things that I was just naturally good at, right? Like emotional intelligence was not something I was naturally good at, but figuring out how to live my life and not be told what to do, I've always been good at that. And I think that is creativity in action.
Right.
Right. So everybody can benefit from this book because you need this creativity in order to be able to live a life on your terms. So if you don't want to just be sitting back being told what to do, right? You're a stay-at-home father and your wife is constantly telling you how to like raise the kids. That's probably because of a lack of creativity on your part. You're probably not taking initiative. So your spouse, your partner is stepping in and saying, hey, do this. Now, obviously, they might be overstepping their bounds, but a lack of creativity will manifest itself in you being basically directed to do something.
Well, and on a different note, too, it'll manifest itself. People may perceive that as you being lazy, right? Where you're not really lazy, you just don't. If life isn't fulfilling, it's hard to be motivated to get up and go and do things.
Right. So. Right, which is true. There's a lot of talk in the book about basically overcoming what she calls negative beliefs. So you'll hear this, and we actually covered this a little bit in our last 3 for 3 and our last riffs and rants with the happiness hypothesis. And in that book, they were basically talking about your affective style. Right. So you would have a negative affective style if you basically had a lot of negative self-talk. So negative beliefs, negative affective style, I mean, they're not exactly the same exact thing. Negative self-talk, they're not the same thing, but they all kind of speak to the same core problem, which is you don't see yourself in a positive light, and that kind of beats you down, which allows you to basically talk yourself out of a creative life, right?
Well, and like specifically the negative beliefs that she talks about, that Julia Cameron talks about in this book, is things that we tell ourselves. So when we start to feel creative, when, as she puts it, when our inner child starts speaking to us, like, hey, I really want to do Y, right? Then a lot of times, immediately, our negative beliefs, the voice inside our head that kind of beats us down says, why would you waste your time on that? Or why would you do that? You're no good, or no one wants to see the picture you drew. Whatever it is we tell ourselves to kind of discourage ourselves from doing it. Those are our negative beliefs. Those are the things that we naturally start to tell ourselves when we try to branch out. Now, not everyone, some people probably have it I think this is a degree thing. So some people hear that voice right off the bat, and some people start doing something and maybe a half hour in, they think, man, I'm kind of wasting my time. I should probably go do something productive. But everyone to some extent hears that voice, that belief.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's true. So she has a couple of tools in the book that help basically overcome those.
Yes.
To use the happiness hypothesis, basically retrain the elephant, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that the happiness hypothesis put forth in helping to retrain the elephant is meditation. And Julia Cameron recommends an activity that she calls morning pages.
Right.
And morning pages is actually something that I've been recommending to friends and family for literally over a decade now. Well, actually, no, it wouldn't be a decade. No, it would be close to 9 years, because we've known each other over 9 years now.
Probably like 8 or 9 years.
Yeah. So I guess so coming up on a decade. But I remember when Kim first learned about morning pages, and she learned about them. Why don't you tell the story of how you first encountered it? Yeah.
So I was in a positive psychology class, because psychology is my undergraduate degree. That was my major. And my teacher, it was an online course, and she was really good about engaging us and keeping us involved. One of my favorite classes, actually. But she had us read.
It's one of the few classes that we still talk about.
We still talk about now, 9 years later. So she had us read an excerpt from this book, The Artist's Way. We didn't read the whole thing, just the part about morning pages. And it talks about how morning pages, Julia Cameron takes meditation just a little step further. So morning pages is her version of meditation. And it's where you're meant to sit down, first thing in the morning, literally roll out of bed, sit down, and write 3 pages of whatever is in your head. And it doesn't have to be anything. Like, you're not writing a book. You're not writing it for it to be read ever again. You're not even supposed to read it once you're done. You just stick it in an envelope and forget about it. And the point of this exercise is it's like a brain dump. You know, it helps you just filter through all of the thoughts in your head. Basically, and kind of find the meaningful ones.
Well, I think really, you know, when you bring it back to meditation, because it's not meditation, it's a kind of meditation.
Right.
It's similar to meditation, but like as a former Buddhist, I guess maybe technically you're always Buddhist once you kind of like go down that path. But as someone who used to practice, you know, sitting Zen style meditation, it's different because with at least Zen meditation, and I think meditation in general, at least certain forms of meditation, what you're really trying to do is quiet your mind, right? And with morning pages, what you're really doing is you're trying to basically exercise your subconscious. You're trying to tap into your subconscious and pour that out on the page. And that helps you kind of like confront the demons. Right. Mm-hmm. You know, basically give the elephant a chance to kind of stomp around a little bit so that you can understand where the elephant wants to go so that you can then kind of like address some of the things that the elephant's like scared about. Right. For me personally, every single time that I do morning pages, I'm amazed at how effective they are, how quickly. Right? Like they're so effective, so fast.
Right. I think everyone's different, and she talks about that too. You know, she said like some people, it takes weeks before they feel like it's really doing anything for them. For me, I don't always get anything valuable out of it. So some days I just write because I'm doing it, and I know it helps me because at least if nothing else, I start the day off with a much clearer head, and so I'm not running through like, okay, what do I need to get done? And I've already got kind of all of the I don't know, tired thoughts out of my head. So I feel like I'm much more productive, if nothing else. But what I write down doesn't always help me. Sometimes it's just, I'd rather be sleeping. This feels like a waste of time, but I'm doing it and I'm glad I'm doing it. And then I'll have something I think about and I write down, but it's not always like valuable.
That's interesting. And I wonder if the reason our experiences are different is because we've engaged with it differently.
Perhaps.
So, I mean, like, for one thing, I've done morning pages in some capacity every couple of years. Mm-hmm. You know, like, and every single time that I've gotten into, like, a major bind since I learned about morning pages, I will go back to morning pages, and I might only do them for, like 30 days or so.
Right.
But every single time that I do that, at the end of that period of time when I stop, it has produced something really valuable. Right. So like the first time that I decided to do like a major career shift, not a major career shift, I'm still in technology, but when I was trying to figure out what to do with my career, you know, do I want to go into like more management? Do I want to be like a CIO or a CTO or something like that? And then I did basically free writing. You know, I did what I said, 100, it was 100 posts in 100 days, and I did blog posts.
Right.
And they were really, really raw. In fact, I've actually deleted them. You might be able to find them on the Wayback Machine somewhere. They're really embarrassing. But it was just really raw writing.
Right.
And very similar to morning pages. Mm-hmm. You know, I've done 750words.com a lot. I did that a lot when we were in Malaysia.
And in Utah.
Yep, and when we were in Utah. Yep. And every single time that I've done that, I've learned a lot about myself. And I think that's the key is knowing, like, trust. She talks about that, trusting the process.
Well, And I'm talking about, you said every time you write, you pull something valuable out. I'm saying over time, there is value. I still do them because they're valuable, but not every day do I pull something meaningful out.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm saying. I think with practice that it becomes easier.
Maybe.
Right? Like yeah. I've found that like I'm able to tap into that subconscious kind of thread a lot quicker. And you're right. Like when I used to do them, I remember when we did them when you were still in undergrad, because yeah. I did them with you, remember? Like
you didn't do them the whole time though.
Not the whole time, yeah. No. But like that was my first experience with like right. positive psychology. I'd taken psychology right. classes at West Point, right. and I thought things like conditioning were fascinating.
Right.
But I'd never heard of positive psychology when I was at the academy. And when you were talking about it, I was like, this is kind of interesting. And being a good supportive fiance, and then supportive husband, I would do some of these exercises with you just for the sake of being supportive.
Right.
But I remember not being fully engaged in the process, and then later, yeah. like really engaging in the process and finding a lot of meaning. And I think the combination of having done meditation in the past and really like seeing the process work right. has allowed me, like, you know, we've been doing morning pages now for what, 3-4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And almost every day now, I'm like, oh, I discovered this in morning pages, right? Like yeah. this thing came out in morning pages.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is just trusting the process and practice.
Yeah. Well, and like, I know for me, when I first did it for part of this class, one of the things we had to do was daily morning pages, and we had to submit them online. And for me, it really helped me. I was trying to decide whether or not to change majors, and I was, you know, there was a lot of
I remember that
conflict there because I had spent 3 years. I was 1 semester away from graduating in a completely different major, but I didn't like it anymore. And all of the career paths I used to be really interested in, not so much now. And so it was like, well, I've put all this time. Do I finish and just not like what I do? Or do I go with something I enjoy more and spend more time in school and spend more money on school and do all these things that just don't technically make sense to me? And so that was really helpful for me at the time. It really helped me distill out my thoughts and kind of distinguish my actual desires from what makes sense, and from all those voices, all of my negative beliefs telling me what I should do. And I'm really glad. I'm glad I chose what I chose, because I chose to do what didn't make sense to me at the time. So.
Right. And I think that that's actually had a huge impact on both of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think like that really set the tone for mind shift, you know, like changing your mindset. And,
mm-hmm.
and I don't know, it's now we can see the impact from right. 9 years ago. At the time, it didn't really seem like that big of a deal.
Or that
the
would
morning
have that
pages
kind of
didn't seem like they would have that kind of an effect, I guess
right.
I should say.
Well, and just the shift from you studying, you know, basically pre-med to
biology to psychology.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think I remember those conversations. I can remember one distinct conversation. We were in a car. We were driving
somewhere. We were visiting someone, and we were driving across states. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
And I was typing on the computer, doing my morning pages.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we had a conversation about it afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was like the tipping moment for you deciding like you were gonna
mm-hmm.
go to psychology.
Yeah, I was gonna change majors.
After that
yep.
trip, that's when you made the change.
Yep.
And it's funny because I talked to so many people that have basically gone down a particular path, and I think that this happened to me. Obviously, you were kind of on that path as well, and I've talked to a bunch of people that have gone down, you know, the path more traveled, to use a proper
of least resistance.
Yeah, to butcher Robert Frost, right? And you want to go down the path least traveled, right?
Right.
The one that speaks more to you. And I think that using tools like morning pages, and then later she has another tool in here called the artistic date, which is basically just you time. It's a time that you set every single week to spend a little bit of time with yourself and do something fun and kind of recreation from the perspective of like recreating yourself.
Right. Well, and the artist date is something we haven't done until just recently, when we actually sat down and said, let's actually read this book. We've been doing morning pages for years. Maybe we should read the whole book.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a fascinating book. But the artist date was something that when I read about, I was like, that's kind of a cool idea. We should have been doing this for the last 8 years. But that's been really fun because it's your guilt-free time to do whatever it is you want to do. And
it could be frivolous. Like it should be not work.
Right. It can't be work, because then it's not a date. And she talked about, and I think it's a really valid point. We could try looking up the quote, but it's probably not worth the time. But she says something to the effect of, most people are scared of the artist date because if you're scared, it's time with you. It's a date with yourself. And if you're scared of this time, that's not really a good sign, because you shouldn't be afraid of being alone with yourself.
Right.
So that's not even close to the actual quote, but if we find it, we'll
yeah, I mean,
we'll
the basic, I remember that quote.
Yeah.
And the basic point from it was, you're scared of self-intimacy.
That's what it is.
Right?
Yeah.
The artist date is a chance for you to kind of like reconnect with yourself. And a lot of us are afraid of reconnecting with ourselves. And we're actually afraid of reconnecting, or of connecting with anybody, right? We're scared of intimacy in general, because intimacy means vulnerability. Vulnerability means opening yourself up to criticism, which is where you got these negative beliefs.
And self-criticism is always harsher than
external criticism
from others.
Right.
And the thing that's especially scary with self-intimacy is that I think it's scary to really look at yourself and question like am I happy with where I am? Yeah. And to view past mistakes or the consequences of choices you've made that you aren't happy with really isn't something any of us relish.
No, but I think that that's actually really important.
Absolutely. I'm just saying, like, that's why it's hard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of this comes back to self-awareness. And, you know, I love talking to people about how do you basically create a life of meaning, right? Like, this is like a thing of mine that like I've talked about for a long time. And, you know, I helped myself, you know, back in 2002, 2003 was when I was basically like pulling myself out of like a really deep hole, and, you know, have created a great life. You know, even before I met you, I had done a lot of work that is basically like right in line with positive psychology and the things that we talk about here on paulandkimberlee.com. And I had just lucked into it, right? Like literally just, you know, through a long period of time, you know, I had gotten into like martial arts as a kid and had needed something to kind of like refocus myself. And that is what led me to Buddhism, which led me to meditation, which was just luck, right? Jonathan Haidt, you know, had talked about how that's one of the 3 ways that you can basically like improve your mind, right? Or, you know, basically heal yourself is through meditation. So, you know, that was just basically just pure luck. But then from there, that gave me a certain amount of self-awareness that then allowed me to basically analyze where I was and make concerted steps, like concentrated efforts to basically say like, no, I want to have a better life, right? Where am I today? I want to have a better life. And that self-awareness was probably the greatest gift that I got from, you know, Buddhism. And what Julia Cameron has done in this book is basically created a guide, a manual to building self-awareness. And, you know, in our 5 phases course that we're going to be releasing soon, self-awareness is the first thing that you need to develop.
It's core.
Right.
Sure.
Because without self-awareness, you can't make other moves. Right. You need to be able to look at yourself critically, and not in a bad way, but you need to be able to take stock of yourself in order to fix
Well, in order
what
to
you
really
want.
change
Right.
for the better, for what, to achieve what you want in life, you have to be able to look at your missteps where you've stumbled so that you can not do that again and so that you can build off of that.
Right. I mean, it's not just your missteps, but like what did you do well? Like,
the positive
where are
as
you,
well.
What makes you happy? What creates fulfillment in your life, right? Deciding to become a full-time programmer instead of just a manager of programmers, that was through an exercise of saying, I love writing code. I love solving problems. And I don't particularly like managing people. Right. Like, I love leading people, but I don't like the management aspect of it. Right. Dealing with budgets and things of that nature, HR issues. Like, I like sitting down and counseling people, and talking to people, but when it comes down to, having to write up a report about that, like, I'm not interested in that.
Right.
So it was that awareness of what do I really like that led me to
a job that is fulfilling.
That's extremely fulfilling, right? And Julia Cameron's book does a great job of giving you two basic tools, which are the morning pages and the artistic date, to kind of bring that self-awareness. And then she breaks down the rest of the book as a series of weekly step-by-steps that walk you through almost like stages of grief.
Right. You view it, you made that connection. I didn't make that connection.
Well,
but
I think the thing that it's not exactly the stages, it's almost like stages of rebirth. It's like the opposite of grief, right? So like first you have to kind of like be like super protective and kind of like
create a safe space.
Create a safe space, exactly. And then you gradually move through these phases where you're getting a little bit bolder, a little bit more connected with your artist, being a little bit more open about your creative intent, right? And exposing yourself to more outside influences that could potentially create those negative beliefs, right? Or reinforce negative beliefs. So I really did see it as kind of like the resurrection of your creative self.
Right.
So while it's not the stages of grief, there was a step-by-step process.
Right.
And
that's true.
And part of that step-by-step process, she actually points out, I think it's like week 4 or 5, that you're probably going to feel like anger, right? Like that you're starting to reconnect with your creative self, and you're going to be angry that you ever lost that, right? Like you're going to be angry at the people that beat it out of you. You're going to be angry at yourself for allowing it to be beat out of you. And I thought that was like fascinating, and I've seen that to be true, right? Like I've really beat up on myself for taking the missteps of trying to climb the corporate ladder,
right? Instead of just jumping right into programming,
right? Or doing even things like this, like this is something that I remember I did a blog when we were in Malaysia when I was doing 750words.com pretty rigorously. And I'd done a blog called Choosing Awesome that was basically this concept just in like a proto form. Right. So like this is something that I've wanted to do for 5 years. Yeah. Half a decade. So, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. So,
I think that, I mean, like coming back to the book, I think it's really and I'm staring at the book, sorry, but I think it's really important. Reading the whole book is really valuable, even if you're not looking to be an artist, for example. Everyone has some form of creativity they want to let out, like some people, for me, for example, I love baking, but I would love it if the things I baked looked a little more Pinterest worthy. I mean, not that I want to spend a ton of time, but I have a very talented sister-in-law who makes these fantastic looking cookies, and like everything looks like something you'd buy at a bakery. I would love to let my creativity out more and do stuff like that. And I always have excuses why I don't, but really they're just excuses. And everyone has something like that, right? And so the great thing about this book is it's broken down. She talks about morning pages and the artist date very first. She gives you your tools right off the bat. And then from there, each chapter is 1 week's worth of step-by-step activities to really tap into your creativity, to let it out, to kind of overcome your negative beliefs. And of course, step one is recognizing, let's acknowledge that we have negative beliefs, and let's create a safe place where we can stop using them as excuses to not do things. And that is the great first step. And then beyond that, she goes through a lot more. But I just think that's something that I don't really know if everyone has done that for themselves before. Acknowledge their negative beliefs and
I would assume
try to overcome
not.
them. I mean, we've both hit walls where we've had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure. I don't think that everyone does. And so reading this book and really going through that activity is extremely valuable, because one of the reasons we are where we are today is because we did this.
Right.
So it's just, I just honestly think that you can't have a fulfilling life without acknowledging that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. Obviously you're going to have some level of fulfillment, but being able to attain, like your optimal level of fulfillment, having the most meaningful life that you can have, really requires, like I said, that self-awareness, but then also using that self-awareness to overcome some of these negative beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And people talk a lot about imposter syndrome, and I was actually reading a pretty interesting article. I wish I had the quote or the author, but she was talking about imposter syndrome as being one of the core reasons why women, there's that wage gap, right? Yeah. That imposter syndrome feeds into why women negotiate lower salaries, because they believe the imposter syndrome is the belief that you are an imposter in the job that you're in, and that you'll be found out at some point, that you're not actually as good as people ascribe you to be. Right. So if that is your core belief, that you have this imposter syndrome, it's going to play into your actions. Will affect your actions. Right. And, absolutely. And what this woman was saying is that one of the core actions that it affects is your negotiating, right? So that when you're at the negotiating table, you don't push as hard because you don't believe as much that you are worth it. Because you don't have that inner passion coming out. You have your negative belief tampering it. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, but one of the things that I thought was really cool when she talks about negative beliefs, and it's funny because I heard about The Artist's Way and morning pages back when you were an undergrad, right? So like 8-9 years ago. And then I joined a group of entrepreneurs called The Foundation, primarily because they did something in their course called mindset work, right? So they said, it's all about mindset. The first thing that you have to do is change your mindset. Right. And in there, they talk about negative beliefs, right? So like I literally had been introduced to this very book, right? Like close to a decade ago. And then just 2 years ago, was like, wow, what is this mindset work? And like, obviously I'd done a lot of this stuff in the past. Right. And, I wouldn't have been able to even get to the point where I was without doing that. Right. Right. I had very strong narcissistic tendencies. I had homicidal tendencies. I was a mess back in the early 2000s. I mean, it was an absolute total mess. So the fact that I was, in a stable marriage with children at the time that I figured out, with great kids, as a good father, at the time that I figured out, like, what are these negative beliefs that this guy, Dane and Andy are talking about? Obviously we all stumble upon this stuff, but Julia Cameron does a great job of kind of outlining what negative beliefs are. Yes. And then kind of calling them out for what they are. So one of the quotes that she had is that negative beliefs are exactly that, beliefs, not facts. The world was never flat, although everyone believed it was. So you're not dumb, crazy, egomaniacal, grandiose, or silly just because you falsely believe yourself to be. And I think that is so true. Yeah. one of our other mentors, people that we look up to, is a guy named Ty Lopez, and he talks about how we have like these collective walls, right? When people were trying to break the sub 5-minute mile or whatever,
right?
No one could break it for years,
barrier.
And like obviously, from the beginning of time, basically, no one could break this record. And then as soon as one person broke it, there was like 4 people that did a sub 5-minute mile within like months of each other, right? And it really it's all about the belief, right? If you can see someone else do it, if you can see yourself do it, then you can do it again, right? It can be done.
Well, and there were so many quotes in the happiness hypothesis from, Buddha especially, but specifically saying like your life, your life is what you believe it will be. Like basically whatever we mentally are striving for, that's the kind of life we will achieve. And so many different quotes saying that same thing over and over again.
Right.
And it's true. And so I guess to kind of wrap things up, the Artist Way is a great place to start with really evaluating. This is a great place to start with really evaluating what kind of life am I mentally building right now? Is that the life I want? And if not, some really simple steps in here to just switch paths to get to where you want to go.
Right.
So we recommend this book for sure.
Yeah, fantastic book. Yes. I think my only criticism is that the weekly commitment is pretty high if you actually are going to do all the steps.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think one of the other things is that it's a very solitary kind of path.
It is a very solitary thing.
So I think one of the things that we're doing, well, I'm not going to say one of the things I think, because it is something that we are doing in our 5 Phases course, is to build in community and pacing so that you don't feel overwhelmed while you're going through this process. Everybody goes through the self-discovery process at a different pace. Mm-hmm. And that's really important to keep in mind, that it doesn't have to be a week-to-week thing, right?
Right.
There are certain things that you might have to spend more time on.
Yes.
And having support and having feedback from people that...
well, even just having people, for example, week 1 of the Artist Way took me more like 2 weeks because I have a lot of other responsibilities other than this, which is focusing mostly on yourself. And so while I still feel it's valuable, having someone to go to if you're feeling discouraged even, like, oh my goodness, this is taking me twice as long as it's supposed to. And to be able to talk about that is extremely valuable, because the danger you run into is it takes twice as long and you feel like you have to do it in a certain amount of time. And then you don't have anyone to commiserate with or to tell you it's okay. And so you just quit because that's the easiest thing.
And I think that's probably one of the things that we do really well for each other, is act as both, accountability partners, but then also coaches.
Yep.
Right. So, making sure that we're not being overly critical, but also at the same time, making sure that we're not,
we don't go too easy. We don't go too hard.
Right. Right. Because if you don't push yourself, then you're never going to go anywhere.
Yep.
But if you push yourself too hard, which is my tendency, is to overdo things and then get injured or get...
you totally defeat the purpose, because now you're set back even further.
Exactly. So I think that would be my only criticism of the book.
Yeah.
Is that it is a book. It's not really like a group activity that is organic and kind of like flexes and flows. Right. Fantastic resource.
But a very good starting point.
And a great starting point. Yeah. Thanks for watching this week's 3 for 3. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, check out paulandkimberlee.com for more exclusive content and videos. If you found this information useful and you want to share it with someone you care about, consider sending them a link to our 3 for 3. It takes all these wonderful concepts and distills them down to a nice short video that's perfect for sharing.